Hey guys, Mr. Bowman here. Today's learning objective is in pink, and we are learning to use inverse normal distribution to calculate the mean. The key part of our learning objective is that idea of the mean. And I know I always come back to this, but let's draw a normal distribution graph. Forgive my wonky one. And that graph in total comprises of 4 bits of information, sometimes 5 bits. So we always have the mean down here. And don't forget we call that mu for mean. We always have the standard deviation up here, and we refer to that as that little circle with a flick. We always have an upper and a lower, so these are where the 4 and 5 one comes into play. And then that portion is an area or a probability. So if you think of what we've calculated using our normal distributions, we first looked at using it to find a probability. We then did some inverse ones to find out the x values. We're now moving on to the mean, and in the next video, we're going to learn out how to find the standard deviation as well. So today we're focusing on, well, if I have all of the other bits of information, so I need all 4 of those. If I have all 4 of those, I can work backwards to find out the mean. Except the mean type of question and the standard deviation, they're a lot harder. And the calculator doesn't do all the work. There is a bit of independent thinking that you need to do when answering these questions. I'm going to run us through a 5-step approach that helps us solve these problems. Firstly, I'm going to clear that blue stuff. All gone. Let's get into the first step. And I've got our question in white here, but we'll write down the first step. So the first step you need to do is you need to draw, I'm going to write ND for normal distribution curve. And that's the same with every question. Always draw a curve and write in the information that you know. So let's draw a little curve. There we go. And there's our middle bit. Okay, so suppose Pikachus in a certain area have a standard deviation of 1.2 kilos. So there's our first bit of information. We're going to write that on the right. Standard deviation is equal to 1.2 kilograms. From these Pikachu, we also know that the bottom 20%, okay, so there we go. So the whole thing is 100%, so the bottom 20% is probably somewhere in this area. There you go. So that there has a probability of 0.2. Weigh 5 kilos or less. So this here is going to be 5. And that means if we had a lower, it would be negative 9999. But we're probably not going to need that information here. And then finally, what is the mean weight of these Pikachus? And there you go, there's our symbol for mean. So we've gotten all of the information we need. Probability, the x value, the standard deviation, and we've written the unknown variable we're looking for down the bottom there. That's our first step. So second step, and this is where it's going to be very different, a bit more complicated. Now I'm looking for us to draw another curve. And I'm going to write standard normal distribution curve. Let's move the curve part. And now these ones are very weird. In a standard normal distribution curve, we know that the mean is always equal to 0 and the standard deviation is always equal to 1. This is always the case in these standard normal distribution curves. Every single time. Even if you don't know the mean, even if you don't know the standard deviation, from above, the mean is 0, standard deviation is 1. So let's draw our curve. So our mean is 0, our standard deviation is 1. What's different here is this number here relates to how many standard deviations something is away. That's our z value. We now lose our x. We don't know 5, and we know it's z. So when we do these, z is equal to question mark. We don't know what z is, right? And we do know the probability, or this shaded portion, that's unchanged. That's still 0.2. So hopefully you've seen these bits here. Mean, always 0. Standard deviation is always 1. The z value, so we lose the x. We need to find out the z value. And the probability over here, unchanged as well. Step number 2. Step number 3 is when we're trying to find the z value. And that relates to the z we put in step number 2. And this here, this is just a regular inverse X question. And that's when our calculator comes into play. So I've got the calculator up here on the right. So we're going to go into stats mode. We're doing distributions, normal distribution, and we're looking at inverse distribution. And we've got a whole bunch of information here. And our calculator inputs, in terms of our tail, we know that's going to be a left tail, isn't it? So we've got a left tail. And that's because we've got on the left-hand side of our graph. We know the area that relates to the probability, that there is going to be 0.2. We know our standard deviation, that there is 1, and that's always the case in these standard graphs. And finally, we know our mean, which is 0, again, always the case. So we're going to plug all that information in. So we've got a left tail, we've got an area of 0.2, we've got a standard deviation of 1 and a mean of 0. And we're going to go execute, and we can see that our x value, it says x, but this is actually our z value. Z is going to be equal to negative 0.8416, and that there had a 4dp rounding. And always sense check at this stage here. We can see our mean is 0. If it's on this side, it should be negative, and if it's on this side, it should be positive. Our number is negative, so that kind of makes sense in terms of our sense check. Okay, part number 4, this is when we're going to substitute into our Z equation. So substitute into Z formula. And I'm going to carry on my working over here. So our equation, Z is going to be equal to X minus mu divided by the standard deviation. And the first thing I want to note, this here relates to your original graph and the Z value that you've calculated. It does not relate to the information on your standard normal distribution curve. So that's the big thing. Make sure you're subbing in the right information. So our Z, we've calculated that already. So negative 0.8416. That there is going to be equal to X was 5. So that related to the 5 kilos minus the mu. And we're leaving that as the symbol because that's the thing we don't know. And we're going to divide that by the original standard deviation of 1.2. Now, this here is just an algebraic equation. We've got one unknown being the mu, and we're going to go ahead and solve that. What I'm going to do, though, is I know algebra is not everyone's strength. I'm just going to show us how can we solve that on our graphics calculator without needing to go through the algebraic steps. So we're going to go to exit, and then exit. If you're in the main menu, we're going to find the equations mode, which is this one here, which is A. Hopefully you can see that. We're then going to go into the solver mode because we're trying to solve an algebraic equation. And here we're going to right click into the equation. We're going to enter in what we've got here. So we've got negative 0. Oh gosh, I didn't put the negative sign in. There you go. Negative 0.8416. And you can see equals is the yellow one above the dot. So you need to go shift and then dot equals. And for our equation, I'm back on the screen, the numerator, make sure you put that in a bracket for the calculator because the calculator will get confused if you don't. 5 minus, we're just going to write x for mu because there's no mu symbol, we'll just write that, and then divided by 1.2. So that's our equation. We're going to go execute, and then once you're into that, a lot of people think the number that pops up here is the answer. It is not. You must click solve. There you go. We can see the answer of 6. So over here, I'm going to write 6, or mu is going to be equal to 6.0 kilograms, and that there had a 1 dp rounding. So we were able to do all of this start to finish with 2 simple calculator tricks and no algebra needed at all. And this here is an excellent question. Obviously, at this stage, maybe you're doing a calculus or an algebra course as well. If you wanted to go ahead and solve that with your algebra, absolutely fine, no issues with that, please do. But we don't need that. We can use our calculator, a few little shortcuts to help us out, and that'll save us time and minimize mistakes in our end of year exam. So guys, hopefully you found this video on finding the mean useful. We had a 5-step process. I just realized I forgot to write the last step. Solve that equation. Hopefully, you'll be able to get into some questions. Now, let's get into a few practice.